All right. Well, hey, welcome everyone. This is Steve Clift with Good Carts, also part of WearCorp. You can see from my little name under my video there. I'm excited to have all of you here at the inaugural sort of event hosted by Good Carts in partnership with Social Venture Circle. We're going to be doing a monthly series of webinars and meetups among the member stores that are part of the Good Carts Network, as well as prospective stores and guests, in order to help us, as I say, grow together and win together. Just a quick intro about Good Carts, just for those who are interested. Good Carts recycles the post-purchase traffic in our member stores, and we turn it into new customers. I'm not going to say really much more about that, except to say we're excited to have anyone join us, whether they're a sustainable Shop for Good brand, we have a Made in USA circle, we have a Black-owned circle, and we have other circles of brands that basically, based on affinity, work together to grow together and win together. And part of growing together and winning together is because we're supported by the members of our network, the post-purchase traffic. At Good Carts, we have the incentive to help you grow and win any way possible, right? Because the more customers you have, the stronger our network is. And so instead of giving Facebook and Google all of our advertising dollars, we're just going to recycle a little of that traffic back to benefit the network, and of course, hopefully each and every member that joins. And so when I talked to Michelle Thomas King, we were chatting this summer, and she talked about her experience with Mata Traders and some of the consulting work that she's been doing, and I was like so impressed. We talked a lot about how you basically succeed, right, and how you win and grow. And I thought, well, I would love to have you in a future webinar. And so here we are today with our first webinar. So Michelle, she's been involved with the fair trade landscape for well over a decade. And now she's actually working with multiple companies and brands and helping them grow. And so I'm not going to say much more except to say thank you to Social Venture Circle and the other partners. Social Enterprise Alliance sent us to their 15,000 people on their mailing list yesterday. And then the last thing I'll mention about these events is that next month we're going to share in the link in the chat. We're having a session on TikTok, and it's meant to be a meetup of folks that have had some experience with TikTok in the sustainable impact brand space, just to swap notes. If you wanted to learn from the very beginning, that might not be the best event for you, but you're certainly welcome. Just to note that phrase, or that focus. And so with that, now we're going to go right into Michelle. And so Michelle's going to share her screen. And everybody, feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along. We're certainly going to take a pause, and then we're going to either do a mix of questions out of the chat, but also potentially some on video. We'll see how big the audience is, but it is meant to be interactive after 25 minutes, I believe, from Michelle with planned remarks. All right, Michelle, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It warms my heart to see so many people here, and so many faces that I actually know. Thank you for the introduction, Steve. My name's Michelle Thomas, and I'm one of the founding partners at Mata Traders. Thank you so much for being here. This is the first time giving my presentation, so forgive me if I read from my notes a bit. I'd much rather prefer to just converse, and we'll be able to do that in about 25 minutes. I wanted to start by looking a little bit at why I'm here and why you're here. I'd like to center my discussion today around two types of learnings. First is the insider knowledge I gained for over a decade on the job at Mata Traders as the director of operations. And second are the learnings I acquired after being lucky enough to transition out of the day-to-day. These learnings would have helped me so much while I was actually at Mata Traders. That's why I want to share them with you today. Why you're here, hopefully you're a social entrepreneur or an aspiring social entrepreneur, or simply someone committed to doing good work that makes a positive social impact of some kind. I want to start just to ask everyone who would consider themselves a social entrepreneur. You can raise your hand in the chat if you want, with that little hand icon. Social entrepreneurship is a way to do three things. Okay, I'm seeing some hands, great. Essentially, it's a way to connect you to your life's purpose. It's a way to help others find theirs, and it's a way to make a difference in the world, all while eking out a living. If you haven't already discovered Investopedia, it's a great resource for clarifying complex business principles. And just to make sure that we're all on the same page today during my talk, I want to just watch 45 seconds of this video explaining what social entrepreneurship is.
Social entrepreneur. A social entrepreneur is a person who is interested in starting a business for the greater social good and not just the pursuit of profits. They are willing to take on the challenges, risks, and responsibilities to solve community-based problems and create positive changes in society. A social entrepreneur might be seeking to produce an environmentally friendly product, provide a service to an underserved community, or even focus on philanthropic goals. They may do this to connect to their life's purpose, to help others find theirs, or to make a difference in the world. The growing trend in social entrepreneurship has been inspired by things like impact investing, conscious consumerism, and corporate responsibility programs. A common example.
Okay, so I wanted us to start with that super basic explanation, just because essentially until recently, I never considered myself a social entrepreneur. And as the founder of a social enterprise, I feel like that was a little bit stifling for me career-wise. And the learning here is that for other business owners out there, it's important to situate yourself within a larger context in order to strengthen and broaden your network and for your efficacy to have the largest possible impact. From my experience, it's much harder or nearly impossible to do this when you're working in your business rather than on it. Can I move this? Yes. Okay. Now I want to talk for a moment about the company I worked in from 2008 until 2020. I don't know, many of you may be familiar with Mata Traders. We're a social impact fashion brand producing apparel and accessories and social service-based fair trade cooperatives in India and Nepal. My good friend Maureen Fetcher is Mata's founder, and another good friend and college roommate, Jonit Bookheim, is the fellow founding partner. And since joining us in 2019, Catherine Stigler has been the managing director. Before moving on, I just wanted to give you a moment to view our website. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the brand, we do contemporary women's clothing and jewelry, but we're mission driven, and you know, our space was within the ethical fashion movement. As a for-profit enterprise, Mata has invested over $6 million into the communities it works with. And just to give you an idea for our scale, we manufacture about 6,000 SKUs a year and employ over 650 artisans annually, 81% of whom are women. Our revenue is split about 70% B2B and 30% B2C. And this changed dramatically after the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we were 85% B2B and 15% B2C. Let's watch this 2-minute video to give you a better feel for the work that we do at Mata Traders.
चेहरा, इसका तो स्वभाव में कैसा बात करने का काम, बहुत अच्छा अच्छा काम सब मिल रहा है, हिम्मत मिल रहा है। रियली में जॉइन होने के पहले कुछ भी नहीं मालूम था, कुछ कैसा इस दूसरे से बात करने के सब कुछ मालूम नहीं था। इधर जॉइन होने के फिर मतलब पूरा फुल चेंज हो गया। और इधर अच्छा परिवार है ना, अच्छा काम मिल रहा है, फायदा हुआ है, फायदा हुआ, सुकून से जी रहा है। लेकिन आपका बहुत कुछ टेंशन हो तो बच्चों की पढ़ाई वगैरह, बच्चों को फीस कराए थे। हमारे यहाँ बच्चे पहले वाला सरकारी स्कूल में जाते थे, हम ये काम करने लगे तो हमें प्राइवेट स्कूल में डाला हो। तो हमारे सब बच्चे 5वीं तक 6वीं तक प्राइवेट स्कूल में पढ़े, उसके बाद में सरकारी स्कूल में आए और उदयपुर कॉलेज तक जाते हैं। अच्छा निकल रहा है, हुआ बड़े लोगों हुआ, पढ़ाई नहीं हुआ, बड़ी परिस्थिति फिर दोनों की पगार से आपने सबका पढ़ाई किया है, उनके पगार से आपने पेट्रोल खाया, यहाँ अपना थोड़ा कौन मिलता है, अपना पैसे से अपना बच्चे को पढ़ाए, फिर लगा कि आप है ना।
So I encourage you to go to our YouTube page and you can watch the rest of the video, but I feel like that gives you a really great feel for the work that the brand does in general. All right, so we'll have plenty of time after this to get to direct questions that you might have, and also just to talk. Now I'm going to get into the meat of my presentation here. I want to discuss 3 phases of transition that are hopefully common to the businesses you're in and that Mata certainly experienced during my tenure there. These are the 3 phases: the startup phase, to scale or not to scale, controlled growth versus uncontrolled growth and its consequences, and then what to do when your revenue plateaus. Oh no. We're going to start with, suppose you want to scale your sustainable or shop for good brand. The best piece of advice I can give you, and a rule of thumb I like to follow, is to examine your financials and ask yourself this question. When your revenue grows, do your margins increase? The answer needs to be yes. This is what investors are looking for when evaluating whether or not your brand can scale profitably and if they want to invest. However, as we all knew, since we're doing mission-driven work, the why for companies like us matters also, right? The why we want to scale matters. On my second trip to India back in 2007, when Maureen and I were meeting with the jewelry producer groups there, they showed us an undercover video of forced child labor. There was about 10 children in a really dimly lit room working very close to the floor over a table doing beading work. And they were kind of rocking back and forth and they had a vacant look in their eye. They looked a lot like, caged animals look in a zoo that are trapped. And the producer group asked, do you know what these children are making? And we said, no. And they said, well, they're making Christmas ornaments for Walmart. And my business partner and I said, our reaction was, if consumers knew who made these, they wouldn't buy them. And that was kind of the impetus behind creating Mata, like creating a brand where the consumer knows everything about where the product comes from. I think that one of the things that makes us unique, though, is that when we founded Mata, it was on the premise that the product needs to come first. And if the product sells, the mission will follow. So my second piece of advice, which I just actually put it this way recently, but what this translates to for us is that your margin equals your mission. If you can't and don't achieve sales and you're not profitable, you can't fulfill your mission and you can't scale for that matter. So it's just a perfect marriage of a for-profit social enterprise, right? generally to scale, you might hit one of two snags, right? Either your sales grow too fast and outpace your production capabilities, especially for companies like us working with small workshops or artisan groups that are in their homes. Another snag that could happen is that your sales don't grow fast enough. Unfortunately, this usually just means there's a problem either with your product development or with the marketing and branding of your product. In my experience at Mata, we managed to avoid these two pitfalls. That's why we were able to scale. As a fair trade enterprise, Mata is committed to increasing investment with its producer groups year over year. And this means we strategically identified and developed relationships with buyers and funders who would in turn facilitate that commitment, right? And you should do the same. So for us, that was buyers like ModCloth. They were an online retail only website. They really legitimized our brand. And then when we started in the like 2010, there was just a bevy of fair trade stores that had a demand for fair trade clothing and no one was supplying it. So we had like a niche market that we could access. So let's say you get your brand off the ground, you're scaling it up. We all want to achieve growth, right? Growth is generally your goal. So the first question I would ask is, as your sales increase, are they as profitable as they could be? So I will say that again, to put it in the simplest terms, before you grow your sales, make sure that the sales you already do have coming in are bringing in the most profit that they can. So one of the questions that Catherine, our managing director, asked that saved us during the pandemic was, if we're not going to be able to sell higher quantities, how can we make the quantities we are selling more profitable? How can we make more profit on the quantities we are selling? So one example of how we did this at Mata was via pricing, right? The brand cachet you've developed via a digital marketing strategy or at your trade show representation, for example, can elevate the perceived value of your items. So looking back in 2008, when we were brand new, we had a certain margin we wanted to hit at wholesale, say 58%. And we would set our retail pricing at 2 to 2.5 times that. However, by 2018, when we had been around for 10 years, we were a well-known brand, we had a good following, we could set the retail price a little higher than that 2 or 2.5% because of perceived value, right? We could say, we could set the retail price a little higher and work backwards to price at wholesale, which sometimes allowed us to get a better margin than our 58%, if that's making sense. But the perceived value, we couldn't raise it until we'd raised our brand cachet over that. Took us 10 years to do that. I will say a really basic rule of thumb that we use at Mata is that your profit margin percentage per product needs to be equal to or greater than this formula, 1 minus your gross margin percentage. I mean, I have an English degree, so these types of formulas were not something that I necessarily was conscious of while we were, or that I even knew to look for, but over the years, this one has served us quite well. So once you've maximized your profit margin, it's time to develop and grow strategic sales channels, right? And I know a lot of you are here just, I think, to get into these really specific learnings. So I made a cheat sheet. You're welcome to take a quick photo of it with your phone, if you can see it all. And I'm going to discuss these right now, but quickly, and because this is getting a little tactical, but obviously to grow sales channels, you can grow your customer base, which means your number of customers and or your customer spend. Something we found at Mata, though, was that the customers can be further striated based upon what price point your products fall into. For example, at Mata, our retail price point nearly doubled over the years. It went from $60 retail address to $120 address. The interesting thing about this is the buyer for a $60 dress might be a store that sells clothing under $100, and the buyer for a $120 dress might be a store that sells clothing for over $100. So basically, we opened ourselves up to two markets by having a really wide range of price. The next thing you can do is expand or add categories that have a higher profit margin. And this is very obvious, but the goal is always to sell more of the higher profit margin items. For example, at Mata, jewelry has a profit margin 10 to 15% higher than apparel. So growing the jewelry category is more profitable than us to growing the apparel. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily as easy because there's more competition and our materials aren't where they need to be to compete, but that's another story. Then I can't overstate the importance of an accounting system that will show you these two things. The first thing is to have a record or a report that will show you when sales are booked or made, when the sale is made, versus a report that shows you when the sales are paid. The sales are paid, that's generally just your AR report. But knowing when your sales are booked allows you to plan for future growth. By that, I mean you can create a timeline for future sales targets that's based on when past sales were made, literally customer by customer. However, when sales are paid is what's going to allow you to plan for cash flow. And the most important, like if you're going to run out of cash flow and you can't make payroll that month, it doesn't matter how big your sales are supposed to be that month if you don't actually have the cash to cover your payroll. So those two things are different from each other. And it's really hard to find a system that will show you both. In our case, we had to invent something called the Doc Monster, and you don't want to have to do that. So we can talk about that a little at the end. And my last piece of advice is that it's really important to establish a personal relationship with a specific business banker. This might seem old-fashioned or irrelevant, but it has saved us. It really saved us during the pandemic to get our PPP and things like that. Okay, so those are some of the learnings that I've made over the years on how to how best to grow your brand. So let's say you've been at it now for several years and sales have finally outgrown existing operations. That's what happened to us. As Mata began to scale, we encountered uncontrolled growth though. And in my experience, this can cause revenues to plateau because you're no longer as nimble as you used to be. It's harder to capture emerging market revenues and new types of customers. And if the business has outgrown its current systems, this can stymie your ability to keep putting resources toward developing stellar product, which you always need to be doing, right? So this is the interesting point that we came to. Remember in the video that it says a social entrepreneur seeks to connect to her life's purpose. As a startup or early stage company, it felt to me that Mata enabled or facilitated my ability to do this. However, as Mata grew, a tug of war started between my life's purpose of making a social impact and what was best for the long-term potential of our business. So what this means to me is that there's a difference between knowing what you need to do and knowing how to do it. To be honest, at Mata, it always felt we were pretty good at identifying what we needed to do. But as the business grew beyond our personal capabilities, we could no longer get away with figuring out how to do it on the fly, especially not when the business was growing at a super fast pace and things were speeding ahead. One just to come full circle here, for example, Mata has contended with a significant increase in the cost of goods per dress over the years since 2008, which can be expected, meaning what we paid in 2008 to our producer groups for one dress is much, much less than what we pay in 2022, right, to our producer groups for one dress. But as our prices increased, we found ourselves becoming too expensive for our customer base, right? Our fair trade customer base. How are we to survive? Remember our two markets, stores that sell for under $100 and stores that sell apparel for over $100. So basically, as social entrepreneurs, we had evolved access to a shrinking market and needed to bring in a sales professional who could access store buyers that sell apparel for over $100. Like, so the key learning here that I've discovered is that knowledge of the industry and industry experience is more valuable than education, accreditation, or previous job title. So as a social entrepreneur, I lacked fashion industry experience, right? And I was more comfortable in the social impact space. Now, for me as a business owner, this was experienced as an identity crisis. And I don't know if most of you are at this stage in your companies or not, and we can revisit this during the question and answer period. But when I realized that the brand might have outgrown us, for me, it was an identity crisis. But you might not be there yet. I did want to talk about one specific example of this learning. I think one of our most expensive mistakes at Mata was in 2016, we hired a former CPA who had an MBA, whose main client as a managing director had been McDonald's Happy Meal toys. So she unfortunately had no sales or merchandising experience, nor did she have any knowledge of the fashion industry, which was the space we were hoping to grow into. But because of her, I think because of her previous job title as a managing director and her previous accreditations, we thought maybe she would be the right person. This is all to say that this is why I value industry experience pretty much over everything else. So we needed professionals who knew how to evolve existing operations in order not to stifle sales. Remember, that's what you're trying not to stifle sales. So you need people who know what they're doing, right? And quite frankly, it was a relief to us when we accepted this. And at Mata, we filled 4 key roles with our transition out. We have a finance director who we've had for a long time. She's got her MBA. She's one of the backbones. We hired a managing director who has over 20 years of experience as a buyer retailer. We hired a national sales director who came from a brand that was making upwards of $20 million. And we hired a production manager who had expertise in fit, which was almost the first time we'd done that, and the brand had been around for 10 years. So how am I doing on time? Just as an aside, I want to call out the importance of the merchandiser role to you all, which is often underrepresented in the social impact scene, I think. Merchandising is often intangible, and unfortunately Investopedia doesn't have a video defining it, but I think of merchandising as the perfect combination of the art and science of a brand's business, meaning it's someone who understands, who can marry trend and product development with numbers and profit. And Mata has floundered without a talented merchandiser in the lead, first with our founder and now with the current managing director. We're much stronger. So I think overall, this is saying you've grown your brand, you've navigated some good deal of growth, you've maybe expanded beyond your current systems, what you need to do next. In my experience, the leader of your company really has one job, and it's to lead the people in the company. As an entrepreneur sucked into the day-to-day, that was almost impossible for me to do. That's the reason why the leadership role can be so taxing, right? Not only are you responsible for your job duties, but you need to lead all the people in your organization. And as an owner at Mata, I was constantly falling short at either one or the other. What I've learned from our current managing director is that the best type of leaders get people to do their best work, meaning they maximize their employees' capabilities. And I'm a big believer in something Tory Burch, I believe, has said, hire people smarter than you. I think as a business owner, you'll know you found the right team when it feels that they're actualizing long dormant plans that you've always had for the business. I think one of my last tips for how to succeed is to build money into your budget now for professional services like consultants. We use 3 different consultants during our pivotal moments in Mata's evolution, once as a startup, again, to figure out how to stem uncontrolled growth, and a third time when revenue had plateaued. So in conclusion, I want to end by talking about some of the pitfalls and some of the promises that are unique to social impact brands. As a startup, you may have had a simple floor plan, and planned growth allows you to add on meticulously. Unplanned growth, however, can force you to expand haphazardly at breakneck speed, inhibiting you from being intentional in the design of your business. Pretty soon you realize you've built a crazy house with disjointed additions that's just barely able to withstand a storm. And like any poorly planned enterprise, the roof leaks, electrical is cripplingly expensive, and the plumbing is unreliable. You can't attract the right talent because no one wants to join a disorganization. So this is what you want to avoid, and budgeting for guidance is one way to do that. I think 2 of our main pitfalls that we suffered at Mata was, 1, owners often subsidize their business's financials by being underpaid. And this will not help you in the long run when you're trying to professionalize your organization, because you won't have the funds to attract the talent you need. In order to be sustainable, you need to be able to pay yourself a fair market value wage. Again, margin equals mission. And a second pitfall is often margins can be too low to sustain the cost of growth. I'd be curious to hear from other social impact brands at the end of this if they experienced something similar. I think this is something that's unique to the social impact space, and it is overcomable. It's just tricky. As far as the promises, as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, as a for-profit social enterprise, Mata has invested over $6 million into the communities it works with. That's our life's work. Everyone who's worked at Mata over all these years, I mean, that's our labor of love, that that much money has gone in to help underserved and marginalized communities in India and Nepal. For example, at Mata, 1 dress purchase provides 17 days of wheat flour, 5 days of rice, or 7 days of schooling for an artisan's family. And by my very, very loose calculations, we've sold like over 165,000 dresses. So that's how much of an impact we've made. Mata's played a pretty significant role in shaping demand for social impact products, hopefully. This is my email if you want to get in touch. I would say I'm most skilled at helping companies do 2 things. The 2 things I think are most important: ensuring current and future sales are profitable, and developing and implementing sales strategy for retail and wholesale growth. So please reach out if you think I can be of any help. And now I would love to take some questions if we have any.
Michelle, we certainly have questions coming in. Plus, we had about 25 that were submitted before the event. So we have a wealth of questions. I actually want to just take Linda Brent just sent one in, just kind of a personal question about how your own role has changed over time at Mata.
Oh, my own role, the founder founded Mata in about 2006, and I joined in 2008. And at first, we did everything ourselves. Like even, the inventory was in our basement of our apartment. We hired our employees worked out of our kitchen. So we've over the years transitioned. Now the office warehouse is like, we have a 6,500 square foot office warehouse. But I've transitioned completely out of the day-to-day. So we're lucky enough to have just an amazing team to run the business for us. And we, we kind of work on the long-term strategy, I would say.
Great. So I have a follow-up question. You're just talking about the 6 million that have been invested into the community. Just to be clear about that, that's up and above the actual labor costs. Is that right? So these are community activities, or is this actually part of the labor, paying people well, essentially?
This is our purchase orders.
Mm-hmm. But you mentioned having invested 6 million into the communities that produce your products. And one of the things I was wondering about is labor cost, and how you balance that with impact. And so obviously, just paying people well is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like when you mentioned wheat or rice, is it that individuals are making these choices, or are there some community things that happen? Am I familiar with fair trade? Sometimes involves in certain villages, they put in a water system, or there's some collective spending. Could you just kind of explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So we work with cooperatives and artisan groups that have a pretty stable infrastructure already in their communities. So they give their members access to resources. First of all, lots of times they're cooperatively owned. So the women sewers are going to reap any profit that the co-op makes is split among the member owners. Then they get access to resources like literacy training, there's on-site daycare, there's health checkups, there's a social worker on staff. So those are the type of resources the women have access to when they come to work for the co-op or they become a member owner.
Okay, well, let's switch gears a little bit. Good.
I want to say one other thing.
Yeah.
Lots of times the cooperatives open them their own bank accounts. So it is actually the first time that they have access to the money that they're making, that they don't put their husband's name on it, for example.
Thank you. That's, quite inspiring model. I when you think about, people often talk about maintaining your margins or maintaining your profit as your margin. They often think about, well, how do you just cut labor costs to the bear, right? And that's what you're not doing, right? You're not cutting labor costs to the bear. You're trying to figure out, often it sounds like, how to charge more to certain, folks in order to raise your profits that way. Afsan has a question in the chat. He was talking about customer acquisition costs, and you had mentioned that you have shifted from doing more D2C during the pandemic. So how did you gain the new customers and not have that eat up your profits with the customer acquisition costs? Advertising and marketing and those types of things, assuming they're digital acquisitions.
Well, I can't speak to that as much. One thing I know is that most of the brands that I know that did well during the pandemic all had an e-commerce retail arm to them, because for a company like ours who mainly does wholesale, most of our customers, our store customers, they themselves were closed during the pandemic, right? So I think in 2020, wholesale shrunk by 40%, but retail increased by 18%. And in our case, we were just lucky enough to already, we've had a relatively decent retail presence for a while. I think something that the new team has done is they really upped the game in terms of what our social media looks like. So it probably, it attracted a new customer base in that way. So your social media content is usually what does it.
Great. So Michelle has a question in here about going back to that business, the banker business partner. Any recommendations in terms of you know, how to approach that the right way, how to find that person?
Yes. In my experience, I wouldn't recommend, unless you're using a local bank, if you're gonna, I wouldn't recommend going to a local branch. We always had our best luck when we made an appointment with like the highest level business banker we could get connected with at like at the downtown office, for example. Like you want to find a banker who's motivated to get you more money from the institution. Like that needs to be their motivation. And lots of times that's their job. Like the business banker we have now, or who we had for a while, she was focusing on women-owned businesses under 5 million. So that worked really well for us.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So another question, you mentioned that you brought in like 4, I guess, higher level executives into your company that had industry talent. But you've had a historical culture of impact. And so how in bringing them on did you maintain that culture of impact when you brought in new folks that maybe had spent many years in a very different kind of retail manufacturing type of structure?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So like you mentioned, you hired 4 really talented people at a higher level that came in that brought skills into your company. And maybe they were all really into impact on their resumes or whatever. But, you know, if you've had a lot of experience in traditional retail or traditional merchandising and the like, and suddenly you have all of these impact costs, you know, how do they embrace, or how do you keep the spirit of the company as you grow, rather than just becoming bottom line as you?
Well, one way that I'm not that familiar, but like the B Corp kind of helps you do that, right?
Yeah.
Like becoming a B Corp.
Yep.
And then in terms of I mean, the guidance that we got when we were working with the last consultant we worked with to help us find these people, she was really driven by you know, her motivation was that the orders were creating so much business for the groups. Like that was what she cared about to begin with. So she helped us find people who would like align with that vision. So I mean, other than just keeping it always in it should always be in your strategic
your goal. Great.
Yeah.
So I got a question from Christine here about how did you know when it was time to bring investors to become part of your company?
Well, we haven't had investors. We had an angel investor early on who actually just bought in at this point, who became a partner. That's something I've been learning a lot more about. Like if you learn about social impact investing, right? The idea is that there are investors out there who are going to care about your bottom line and your net profit, but they're going to value the social impact work that your brand is doing also. And those are the ones you want to look for.
I'm doing a little time check here. We're at about 12 minutes if we're going to do a full hour. And so I'll let everybody know we're going to use all that time. And then after Michelle is done speaking, if anyone wants to hang out and get a little demo on Good Carts, I don't care if it's one or two of you, as long as you're here when we stop the recording, there's a chance to just kind of hang out a little bit. And obviously we have had great turnouts. That's why we stayed on the chat. We've lost one person, right? We had 47, now it's 46. So this is amazing. So I'm just going to take a look here at some of these questions. One other question that I've sort of had is the, is there a channel for you to bring in younger talent as well as like, how do you, I guess, across generations, if you will, bring in folks that maybe are green, but maybe have the right aptitude to help you, in your headquarters, if you will. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, definitely. I guess, you can think of experience in different ways, but I think there's certain roles that are perfect for a mix of people. Like, for example, if you're going to hire a social media, like a brand manager, like the person who does the content, generally they would their experience might not, it will be with social media, right? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily with, I don't know, fair trade or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. David actually has a question. Maybe I can build on that. He was interested in sort of what are some of, I'll read it out verbatim here. It says, what are your favorite channels for discovering customers interested in socially impactful brands? So this maybe gets into the D2C space a little bit. You mentioned your social media before. But there are a lot of these marketplaces that are emerging out there. There's influencers with blogs and they highlight products. Are there any other things like that you found have expanded ModeTrader's customer base?
Well, since at the beginning that I opened with, right, the idea you need to expand your network. So yeah, like there's the Sustainable Fashion Forum, for example. There's the Social Enterprise Alliance. There's this thing called Remake, which I found, which is really good. There's Common Objective. There's the Fair Trade Federation, Chicago Fair Trade. LA has a fair trade group, and so does New York. There's something called Be Social Change.
They're a great network. I've been part of their webinars. Yeah.
Yeah. There's there's a lot more. I don't know where you find a list of all of these, but
well, it just so happens that we're doing a Thanksgiving post, thanking a lot of our collaborators and partners. And so there's like about a dozen of them, and Social Enterprise Alliance being one of them. And so we will have a blog post on Good Carts that highlights some of these different networks, Fair Trade Federation and others. And one of the things I'll say is that finding ways to work with those networks can help expose you as a whole. So for example, the Fair Trade Federation, I believe, they have a whole section on fair, which is like find us wholesale. If you want to find, basically wholesalers list their stuff and stores can buy their stuff, and there's well over 100 Fair Trade Federation members that are listed there, getting access then collectively. I'm gonna look back at the questions here. See if I have seen anything else that's come in the last minute here. There was a Gitzel posted a question about, hey, can you go through your formula point by point, essentially? I don't know if we have time for that, but maybe you could just take a minute, just, what does that formula actually mean that you shared earlier?
1 minute. You mean?
You had the something equals this. You had a formula you put out there. That one there. Yeah, if you could just talk through it.
Oh, this just means the profit margin percentage is what your profit margin is for one single product when you're doing your costing sheet. The the profit margin that you make on that product, once you know like how much it costs you and what you want to sell it for, it needs to be equal or greater to than 1 minus your gross margin percentage. So what that means essentially is the higher your gross margin, like the more healthy your company, the less profit you need to make on each item. But you would want to always make as much profit on each item as you can, as the market can bear, because again, margin equals mission. So this is like you use this when you're doing your costing.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, Michelle, I guess what I would like to do in the last few minutes here is say if you have any closing remarks, anything that you'd like to just highlight or anything that came to mind while we were chatting that you wanted to share with the folks that are here.
I would just like to say thank you so much for coming. Doing an event like this is hard because I don't know the mix of the audience. So I hope there was something for everybody. I always like to say, you know, there isn't a silver bullet, right, for making it all work. There's no silver bullet. It takes a long time and a lot of learning, and hopefully though, you're motivated by the good work that you're doing. Like you're all doing really, really important work, and hopefully that keeps you going every day.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I'm going to, as I chat here, put in the link for our, for our next month's event on TikTok. Again, everyone is welcome. If it's larger, we're going to do a lot of small groups. Actually, Billy, I'm having trouble doing that quickly. So if you could just, actually, no, I got it now. In real time. All right, let's see if I can copy that. So that's going to be in the chat. What we're going to do now is for those who want to hang out and just, I'll do a little demo of Good Carts. Also, you know, we can do a little two-way chatter. If anybody wants to give a shout out, we can do that as well. But I want to thank everyone who came in to watch us on demand. Thank Michelle for being here. So thank you very much. And encourage you to check out Michelle's work. And definitely should note that Michelle, in part, was excited when I chatted with her. She's trying to help other companies in this space go even deeper with some of the things that she introduced you to. So don't be shy in contacting Michelle, particularly if you're looking for opportunities consultants and the like to help you grow. Michelle is part of that community. So let me say goodbye then officially on the recording, and I'll just push stop right now.